With the best one in the world, every steam boiler will have downtime, either for the annual inspection or because it needs repair. So everyone needs a plan for bringing a high boiler on site. So here are my tips for hiring boilers. If you need a boiler that's 7,000 kilograms an hour or less and under 13 bar in working pressure, then you're in luck. The UK hire industry has a lot of quick deployment units in this range that could be up and running in less than 24 hours. Larger and higher pressure units are available, but they tend to be what we call a static. That's a boiler that isn't readily moved, shall we say. It's going to come to site on a flatbed or a low loader. It will almost certainly need craning off. And the support equipment for it, things such as fuel tanks, feed water storage, will likely also come separately and stand separately to the boiler. You need some hard standing, ideally close to the boiler house, and you'll need enough space for the cranes if you're going to need them. Where the boilers supply with separate ancillaries, such as feed tanks or oil tanks, you're going to need space for those too. And if you're going to be running on oil, whether that's through a separate tank or an integrated tank, you'll still need access for an oil tanker to get in to make regular deliveries. Now let's be clear, you can't just break the connections on your existing boiler and run some hoses from the temporary unit to where your crown valve used to connect, for example. While flexible pipe are an almost inevitable part of any temporary installation, they really need to be reserved just for the final few feet of any connection, with the majority of the run hard piped, as you would a permanent installation. Now, just like any rigid pipe installation, flexibles need to be as straight as possible, using long radius bends, and be adequately supported throughout the run. Steam hose also should have a fall in the direction of travel, certainly shouldn't have any loops in it, and it needs to be appropriately drained and steam trapped, as you would a rigid pipe. In all honesty, I could make an entire video just about the subject of flexible pipe, but maybe I'll save that for another day. The best answer is to install what we call a docking station. Now this is fuel, steam, condensate, water and power connections, permanently installed at the spot where you would park your hire unit. And that then will serve to keep the temporary connections to the absolute minimum. If for some reason you're unable to recover the amount of condensate you usually would back to the higher boiler, then you need to realise that will mean that the feed tank in the higher unit will run necessarily a little bit lower in temperature. And the way that the system will compensate for that is to use more steam in the steam injection unit than perhaps you would do with your normal system. In a worst case situation where you're not recovering any condensate at all, around 15% of all steam that leaves the boiler will be being used just to keep the hot well up to temperature. Now 15% is not a small number, and that could mean that you actually need a bigger higher unit to cover for the boiler that's currently out of service to make up that extra 15% that you're going to need. One thing you also need to be aware of is if you change the amount of condensate you're recovering, you're going to change what the water looks like as it goes to the boiler, and we therefore need to look again at the chemistry. Water treatment should always be front of mind. Check your contract to see who's responsible for looking after the water treatment with the boiler. Generally it's you, but it might not be. Treatment regimes are boiler specific, and you may need to treat the higher boiler differently to the way that you treat your own plant. And remember, if you break it, you'll pay for it. The Pressure System Safety Regulations require you to have a written scheme of examination for your system. And whenever you connect something new into your system, even if you've only hired it for a period of time, that constitutes a modification, and that requires you to notify your competent person of that change. And that's true even if the hired equipment comes with a written scheme of its own. BG08 is published by the Combustion Engineering Association. It covers everything I've talked about in this session in some greater depth. It's actually part of a family of documents that cover everything within the industrial boiler house, including hot water and thermal fluid systems, and they're regularly updated and well worth having.